Hey, what's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another edition of Financial News of the Horrific and Parasitic, volume number 10 for the week of October 5th to October 9th. Now, I really hope you stay for the entire duration because there are going to be some hidden gems. This week's format is going to be a little different. There's definitely going to be some very high utility information here, but I'm not going to tell you where I'm going to insert it, so you'll just have to listen. So please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Please do like and comment. Thank you for all of my beautiful patrons and everyone that has contributed to my GoFundMe.com campaign. I'll put the links below. That only has 5 weeks left in this campaign. So if you would like to sponsor my content, help me produce more content, please do go check out that link within the next 5 weeks. And let's get started. So you might wonder what's up with the Raspberry Pi and the horse mask image in today's this week's edition of Financial News of the Horrific and Parasitic. And well, I'm gonna start with more politicians taking these lockdowns to an even more absurd level. At this point, I just feel like all these politicians know that this virus is only like 2% as dangerous as they are making it out to be with their incessant fear mongering. So at this point, I feel like they're just trolling us. They're just trolling us, saying, hey, how stupid are the people that we lord over? Let's see how comical we can make our mandate. So in California, Governor Gavin Newsom just said those that choose to eat out at restaurants, that don't choose to shelter at home, should wear a mask, wear the face mask, quote unquote, in between bites. Can you imagine that absurdity? First of all, touching your face mask all the time is going to transfer like droplets of the virus if anyone else has it to your face mask, and you're going to like into your face and touching it. So you're going to take one bite, eat. I'm sorry, take one bite, put the face mask back on, then chew, and then when you're done, take it off, take another bite. It's really at the point of being comical. So I'm not going to really talk too much about the lockdowns other than just one other point, because this kind of snowballs into my last podcast. I said that when we comply in one area of life blindly and do not follow our heart and do what we know is right, then this type of blind obedience will help strip us of our other freedoms and liberties in other aspects of life, because it will just, once we give those that are ruling over us a centimeter, they will take a kilometer, no doubt. So one of the horrible side effects, or not even a side effect, I should just call it an effect. You know how in pharmaceutical ads they always have that disclaimer at the end of all their commercials is that side effects include include diarrhea, headaches, joint aches, pains, fever. You know, those are not side effects; those are effects of that pharmaceutical medication. If enough people like suffer them, how can you say that's a side effect, right? So in any event, one of the effects of these economic lockdowns, unfortunately, there was a recent study that was administered by Qualtrics, which is part of some university in Australia, but they conducted this survey. I don't know why it was an Australian university that was basically given the task of studying mental illness, the effect of these economic lockdowns on mental illness in the United States. But anyways, they did between June 24th and 30th. They surveyed a total of 5,412 people, and they invited 9,896 adults to take part of the survey, and then 5,412 actually partook in the survey, and they wanted to assess basically mental health. And what they discovered is not good, because they said that among adults 18 years of age or older, that 41% reported having at least one adverse mental or behavioral health condition, including depression, anxiety disorder, trauma stress related disorder that was specifically related to the economic lockdowns. And they also said that the percent of survey respondents who reported seriously considering suicide. So they had different degrees of consideration, but this was for those who said they seriously considered suicide within the past 30 days, was almost 11%. That is so high. Out of those 5,400 people that responded, almost 11% said they seriously considered taking their lives. So again, for those of you that say, oh, I don't care about these stupid lockdowns because I'm working at home, it doesn't affect my life. Well, you know what? You go to dry, and I haven't saw another survey that said for those that were already suffering, right, from some type of anxiety or depressive disorder when the economic lockdowns were started, that their serious consideration of suicide went up to 1 in 4. To 1 in 4. So that's just insanity. And for those of you, again, that just are very selfish and narcissistic and just thinking of yourself and not really investigating the science of these lockdowns, because it's an absurd response to the science of the actual virus, good on you, because now you're causing so many people to have serious suicide thoughts around the world. Now, I want to get into the next thing I want to get into is kind of a continuation of the stories from my last podcast about how we tend to view certain stories just through the lens of our biases and prejudices, which is called confirmation bias, of course. Now, the big story, this is not a financial news story, but I will get to it, so just bear with me. The big story that came out this past week was the whole Russiagate story, saying that the Hillary Clinton and Obama administration basically made up this story of Russiagate to distract the public for any, basically for Hillary Clinton's abuses, where she had that private email server that was illegal inside her home. So basically, there's this guy, Tom Fitton. I don't know who he is. Is he a FBI person? I'm not really sure who Tom Fitton is. Anyway, that's not really that important. But I said there were new bombshell revelations from the director of national intelligence, that suggested Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration lied about the nature of Russian interference and when President Trump was elected. And again, this has nothing to do with whether I'm pro-Trump, anti-Trump, don't care about politics. I'm just basically stating facts that they said Russiagate has been about Hillary Clinton. They said the FBI knew that the guy pushing this whole Russiagate story was compromised. And even though they had intelligence that said the Russians had information that Russiagate was a lie, and they knew Hillary was making it up, that the FBI suppressed this information. And then, does this really come as a shock to anyone, unless you're like an ardent Democrat that can't see through the prejudices of your distorted lens filter, that you're just saying, oh, this whole Russiagate story was true from the jump. Because from the jump, the independent media always claimed there was never a smoking gun about this Russiagate. There was never any evidence, but they said they had mountains of circumstantial evidence that pointed to the conclusion that came out this week, that Russiagate was a totally fabricated story by Hillary Clinton to draw attention away from her illegal mail server that she was holding inside her home and using to send out emails of a confidential and top secret nature that was illegal. So, we have people like Rachel Maddow of MSNBC that, again, failed to embody the true spirit of a journalist, and that's why I continue to say that the so-called journalists are complete clowns, because all they do is they have more in common with actors than journalists, because all they do is report the narrative that their media bosses tell them to report. So they're just reading lines like an actor when they're where they're trying to pretend they're actually telling us the truth. And Rachel Maddow, someone that has always stood by Russiagate was credible. This is a true story. And, that's why I stated for years that mass media journalists are not to be believed, and that the only journalists that still embody the true spirit of journalism are those that work for independent media sources. And I can go through a slew of other examples. I'll probably just go through maybe like one more. And as I go through this example, try to remember, I'll go through two more. Okay. I'm going to talk about the Anthrax Letters in 2001 that happened shortly after 9/11. And I'm going to talk about the whole chemical gas attack by Syrian President Assad, the alleged, because it turned out that was not true, in Duma. Okay. So let's start with the Anthrax Letters. Now, again, try to recall exactly what you remember thinking about these incidents at first, because often our memories remain tied to the mass media narrative blitzkrieg that happens as soon as these incidents are reported by the media. And they're not tied to the truth in any way, but it kind of distorts our memory about these events. Now, these letters, for those of you that may not know, we're not American, that are watching this, they were sent to a bunch of people. Tom Brokaw, who is like a news anchor. They're sent to originally, at first, to just civilians. And then they were sent to politicians. So at first, when they were sent to civilians, the first few letters that were laced with weaponized anthrax were dismissed by the White House administration at that time. They said these are not terrorist acts. This is just like some rogue crazy person setting bioweaponized anthrax to people. But then when the same types of letters started showing up to senators' offices in DC, then they went to the narrative, hey, this is definitely terrorism. So at first they actually went with a narrative saying this is not terrorism, but then when U.S. senators receive them, then they changed the narrative saying this is definitely terrorism. And one of the letters that was sent to a news anchor, or I should say an actor anchor in America, said, it basically had these statements. It says, death to America, death to Israel, Allah is great. Now, this kind of is like maybe a 10-year-old deception tactic, right? You say all the things you know from watching movies that terrorists say, and then the media will put, oh, this is proof that Islamic terrorists were behind these anthrax letters. Remember, because that was the narrative that was being spread. But meanwhile, the FBI, by the next year, narrowed down their search to the U.S. Army's Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick in Maryland, and they basically pinned those letters on Dr. Bruce E. Ivins. And some people say that the evidence wasn't hermetically sealed tight against Dr. Ivins, but we'll never know, because apparently he committed suicide shortly after those charges and killed himself. So, but the fact of the matter is that own U.S. intelligence agency said that was likely someone that was an employee of the U.S. Army that had sent out those anthrax letters. And of course, it was terrorists, like it was a terrorist act, but it was domestic an act of most likely. Okay, because I said the proof is still kind of somewhat disputed from everything I read before I made this podcast. And so it's not airtight, but it says most likely it was tied to an employee of the U.S. Army and not a foreign enemy. Now let's move on to the Syrian chemical attacks in Duma, because what happened was that at the UN Security Council, there's testimony of Jose Bustani, who was the director general of this organization, whose investigative research was constantly referenced by the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, as saying that this is direct evidence and proof that Syrian President Assad had executed a chemical gas attack on his own citizens in Duma. But this director general of this organization, I can't remember what the OPCW stands for, it's an acronym, but it was basically this investigative type of agency that investigated the credibility of those Syrian gas attacks at Duma, Syria. They said that they found The Director General of that organization said that they found evidence that undermined the official narrative that came out from his organization. But they said all three of those nations, US, UK, and France, all the elected political officials, blocked the testimony of this director, saying that the evidence was false at the United Nations. So, and again, let me read you some of what this Jose Bustani said. He said, "At great risk to themselves, the inspectors have dared to speak out against possible irregular behavior in your organization, and it is without doubt in the organization's and in the world's interest that you hear them out. But still, US, UK, and France all censored all this testimony that raised concerns about this research agency's behavior in the Duma investigation. And in fact, they went as far to say that there was no scientific evidence whatsoever that a chemical gas attack occurred, and it's more likely that the attack was entirely staged for political reasons. Of course, the reasons US, UK, and France would block that testimony and completely censor it from the very agency whose evidence they used to justify bombing Syria, because they bombed Syria based upon that false evidence. So again, don't get me wrong, because I'm saying for people that want Hillary Clinton arrested because she totally fabricated the whole entire Russiagate narrative, and people wasted like millions of dollars of US taxpayer money investigating this, perhaps even more than millions. I'm not sure how much taxpayer money was spent, but it was a lot that was wasted on this whole Russiagate hoax, that people want her arrested and sent to prison for her crimes. And don't get me wrong, this should happen, but I doubt it will. But also what I'm saying is the people that argue for her arrest, for her imprisonment, should also be arguing for the imprisonment of these so-called journalists, mass media journalists, who I call actors. So they should be calling for the imprisonment of these actors that actively suppressed information I just discussed. And I'll put the links below so you can go read about this yourself if you're unaware that there was no scientific evidence that chemical gas occurred in Duma, Syria, that served as a justification for the US, France, and the UK to bomb Syria, in which this is even worse, right, than what Hillary Clinton did, because innocent people died because of the fact that certain actors in the mass media sold this false story, deliberately sold it. I mean, for those that we can find evidence, they deliberately suppressed the truth and sold this false story. These actors have to be arrested and sent to prison. We can't hold people to a different standard just because one is an actor reciting lines, pretending it's the news, and another person's a politician. And one last thing before I move on. Even in 2019, current U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told an audience of students at Texas A&M University that when he was head of the CIA, he was responsible for, quote, and he was bragging about, he's laughing while he said this, quote, lying, cheating, and stealing, end quote, to benefit the United States. He said, quote, like we had entire training courses about lying, cheating, and stealing. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment, end quote. So again, he said when he was a cadet, he just really was making a mockery of lying, cheating, and stealing, to implement regime change in other nations, to kill innocent people. So in those regime change exercises or theater operations, and he said when he was a cadet at West Point that their code was, quote, you will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. And then they said when he made that comment, he had this smirk on his face. It's because that's what he just said. All he did when he was the head of the CIA was lie, cheat, and steal. So again, because this is on record, this is on public record, shouldn't Mike Pompeo go to jail too? Shouldn't there be an investigation to what he lied, cheated, and stole? Because there's the same people that want Hillary Clinton to be in prison and go to jail, or go to prison, not jail. Jail is just holding area until you are sentenced and then go to federal prison. Shouldn't Mike Pompeo be arrested and go to federal prison too? Again, examples are limitless, right? So this is kind of like piggybacking on my last podcast, because we can't hold people to different standards of justice. That's just ridiculous based upon what we feel about a certain person. Justice is justice. It should be immutable. And there are examples of that are limitless. I could probably go on for 8 hours and make this volume 10 8 hours long, because the examples are limitless about this, about how people just will apply their justice to their own personal biases. And we all have to stop. We all have to stop doing that. So if you're saying, Hillary Clinton should go to jail, then so should all the actors that lied about Syria and the Duma and the chemical gas attacks, because I guarantee you, if they were investigated, a lot will show that they suppressed the truth, that they knew they're deliberately telling lies. And then Mike Pompeo said he's on record saying he lied all the time and cheated and stole all the time. So investigate what instances he lied, cheated, and stole, and put him in, arrest him, and send him off to prison as well. So I'd be happy if they all go to prison. Now, I told you I was going to get into the financial aspect of this, but actually before I do, I want to get into Raspberry Pi, right? Because people are like, what is Raspberry Pi? This is going to be a great utility for anyone out there, I believe. And even this will be a great exercise for those of you that are locked down and say, oh, my kids are so bored, they're at home. I want to give them something of great utility, because we all know that institutional schooling does not have a lot of great utility, a lot of knowledge that the children can apply to real lives to improve it. So I'm going to give you an exercise that you can give your kids in which this will provide great utility to them, and that's learning about Raspberry Pi. What's Raspberry Pi? A lot of people don't know. It's basically a single board computer. So it's an entire functioning computer that exists on a board. You've probably seen it. It looks like the CPU board. When you've taken like your desktop apart or your laptop apart, and you see the what's it called? The motherboard. Okay, so it's a really compact motherboard, right? And not the CPU board. I don't know what I was saying. So it's like a really compact. It looks like a motherboard, but it can fit in the palm of your hand, and has all the essential components a computer needs, including input, output ports. It has CPU, GPU, RAM, everything basically you need for a computer, and everything that a standard computer can do can incredibly be done on a Raspberry Pi. So you can do image editing, word processing, watching videos, and they're compatible with a wide range of OS or operating systems, including Linux systems, various Android platforms, Ubuntu, and there's the beautiful thing about what I just told you. Because number one, those operating systems, I'm going to actually probably take Microsoft Windows off my laptop and then load up Ubuntu, because I want to learn Ubuntu. Because here's the beautiful thing: if you bought like Microsoft Windows Pro, Windows 10 Pro, it costs $200 right now, right? But guess what? You can download Linux, Ubuntu, because they're all open source operating systems for free. It doesn't cost you a cent. So why waste $200 to upload download an operating system on your laptop or your desktop? That's basically just going to give the government a back window into monitoring all your internet activities. Why not use open source? That's absolutely free. You don't have to spend a single penny or pence on it. And not only that, I've never used any of these open source operating systems like Linux or Ubuntu. So I'll put links in below, for beginner, intro to Linux, intro to Ubuntu. I'm going to learn it. This is something that your kids can learn. And together, the Raspberry Pi starter kit, you're never going to spend more than $100 on the starter kit. And if you're really hard up for cash, you could get one for about $50. So for $50, your child could learn everything they need to know about Raspberry Pi, as well as, and then pair that with an OS like Ubuntu, and you won't have to spend any more than $50. If you want to go crazy, then spend $100 and have your child learn this, because guess what? Ubuntu is a far superior operating system than Windows. You're going to be far less likely to catch viruses, because all the viruses are basically made for Ubuntu or the Apple operating systems, or the Mac OS. And not really made for Linux or for Ubuntu. And I've been reading up about it. People say that these operating systems are far superior to Windows, and just people don't use them because it's not maybe perhaps as intuitive. So you have to put in a little time to learn. But guess what? That's why I say if you have a young child, like 7, 8 years old, you should give this as a task to that child to learn. And I'll put links below again where you can go read up about, things you can do with Raspberry Pi. There's something like 26 things you can do with Raspberry Pi. I'll put a link to that article below. I'll put links to YouTube videos where they're intro to Linux operating system, intro to Ubuntu operating system. And, these days, like a lot of people don't know, you don't need to spend $2,000, $3,000 on a stupid MacBook Pro. You can get a Raspberry Pi for $50, Ubuntu for free, and really learn how to use a computer. Okay, before I wrap up volume number 10 of Financial News of the Horrific and Parasitic, I am going to give you one more value-added item here. So before I continue, actually, because I know I'm being shadow banned on this YouTube channel, so if, again, I disappear from YouTube, you can always find me at k.im. I'm just waiting for them to launch their platform because it's very clear to me. In fact, if you're still watching this before I get into this value-added last segment of this volume, please do subscribe if you're not a subscriber, because I've been stuck on the same number of subscribers for almost the last 30 days. So I know that I'm being shadow banned because this is just not natural. Just like when I wrote the commissioners at the U.S. Commodities Futures and Trading Commission in 2009, 10 years ago, it told them that the bankers at these big Wall Street banks were spoofing gold because I said this price action is not normal. I actually specifically said this is not the price behavior of free market trading in gold and silver futures markets, and they just blew me off, even though now, today, 10 years later, 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice is now validating what I stated by arresting and indicting all these bankers for gold spoofing, even though no one has been sent to prison yet. That's what we need, prison sentences for these crooks. And anyways, any event, I'm going to discuss now a handful of stocks that I have discussed in options trading strategies just to my Patreon. So if you want to know what kind of benefits, I'm going to tell you right now some of these benefits, because all of my patrons have shorted these stocks in the past to massive profits. So I'm going to say right now that I believe that these next 5 or 6 stocks I'm going to discuss that we've all shorted in the past for to great success are going to be good shorts sometime between now and, let's say, the U.S. elections, because I think they're going to get pumped higher, which would make them between now and November 3rd, which would make them even a better short at that time. So I'm not saying the prices right now as a market close as of the end of October 8th are necessarily the best prices to open up put positions, but I'm saying between now and the U.S. presidential election on November 3rd. So let's start with, and all these are crap companies except for one, which is like Zoom, but I think Zoom now is overpriced because Zoom has benefited, of course, because of all these economic lockdowns of virtual video conferencing that's going on. So now I think that stock is overpriced, but the rest of these are crap companies. So let's get started with crap company number 1, Tesla. And so Tesla closed as of the end of October 8th in market trading in U.S. stock markets at $425.92 a share. I think some price between this price and $460 is going to be a good short. PG&E, another crap utilities company in America, is trading at $10.57. I would say some point between this price and $11 a share is going to be a very good short. What is the next company? Zoom, I said, it's not a crap company, but I certainly think it's overpriced. It closed yesterday at $478.55 a share. So some price between that and, let's say, around $5.20 or so, I think it's going to be a good short. Salesforce, another company that really benefited from these lockdowns at $260 dollars and 22 cents a share, I think is really getting overstretched right now. A little bit overpriced. So between this price and maybe 270, 275, I believe it'd be a good short. Deutsche Bank, of course, one of the crappiest banks ever. There's no way it should be $9.36. Could go somewhere to as high as $9.70 perhaps. Maybe even up to $10 a share. But if it goes to 10, then in my opinion, is definite short. This bank share should not be $9.36. It should be 9 cents and 36 pence. That's the price it should be. And the last one, Boeing, of course, we all know what a crap company Boeing is. It closed yesterday, $168 a share. I would say somewhere between there and $175 a share. It's going to be a good short. So that's the added bonus. If you got any value out of this, I think actually the most valuable information I gave was about Raspberry Pi in this volume. Please do subscribe, please like, please comment below. And as always, remain intensely curious and more importantly, remain immensely courageous. And I'm gonna actually put one more link I didn't speak of. There was recently a consortium of thousands of scientists that are coming together in Germany that are now putting all this information together as far as the facts of the lockdowns, and they're basically saying that they're going to file a class action lawsuit against all these political leaders that lock down because they say it's crimes against humanity. There's no scientific basis behind this. They said, in fact, almost everyone that tests, they said the tests that are actually run for infections, they said are so bad. They said almost everyone is almost guaranteed to test positive because they said the false positive rate was over, I believe it was over 90%. It's a false positive. How can you be basing your number of infections and locking down people based upon a test that has a false positive rate of over 90%? It's ridiculous. And like myself, I studied all the science. A lot of these physicians, doctors, scientists are basically saying that the danger of this virus is no greater than the common flu, and that these lockdowns that are killing people literally, because as I told you, the rate of the suicidal depression, as far as the severity of it, the ones that have ranked it serious, those with pre-existing anxiety and depressive disorders, has gone up to 25%. 1 in 4. And so they're literally killing people, and also figuratively killing people are going to kill more people down the road because they have caused millions of small businesses to shutter. So they said this is an atrocity. They said it's a crime against humanity. We're not going to let these ruling class parasites get away with it. And they said we're going to file lawsuits against them. Right now I don't have a lot of faith that these lawsuits will actually have real repercussions. I hope they do, of course, I'm hoping, but they said they may even file a lawsuit against Dr. Fauci and the WHO, because Dr. Fauci deserves to go to jail. If Hillary Clinton deserves to go to jail, then Dr. Fauci deserves to go to jail too for lying to us all and being a pawn and a marionette for Big Pharma. So that concludes this volume of Financial News of the Horrific and Parasitic. Have a beautiful weekend, everyone. Take care.